Chapter 24-29. Cheating? Mo Ling blinked. How? Yi Xian smiled. Why do you want me to go play? Mo Ling sized up Yi Xian, and then she said, I saw you fight earlier, so I know that you have a hidden trump card. Moreover, there are very few swordsmen here. So, I want to see you fight. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, then I'll go give it a try. Mo Ling smiled. All right. Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and he suddenly flew up into the air. He transformed into a ray of light that appeared on the divine martial arena. Meanwhile, the gazes of everyone here descended onto Yi Xian. Needless to say, Yi Xian's move was quite flashy and cool. Yi Xian glanced at everyone here, and then he cupped his fists and smiled. Nice to meet you. Everyone was speechless. Meanwhile, Mo Ling's voice suddenly resounded within Yi Xian's mind. You have to give them universe veins if you want to challenge someone. Universe veins. Yi Xian was first stunned, and then he shook his head and smiled. So this challenge is a way to earn money. However, this is normal. Reputation is important, but if they don't have enough money, then perhaps these monstrous geniuses wouldn't be so proactive. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts and turned to look at the 36 stone pillars. He looked at the last one, and there were 2 large words written on it, Chen Ku. Below this line of words was another line, 100,000 universe veins for each challenge. 100,000 universe veins for each challenge. Yi Xian grinned. He didn't lack money the least right now. He opened his palm, and a spatial ring slowly floated over to the stone pillar. A short moment later, the stone pillar trembled slightly, and then a man walked out. It was the man who'd fought Chu Feng earlier. Chen Ku. Chen Ku glanced at the spatial ring, and when he saw that it had enough universe veins, he immediately put it away. He glanced at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot and slashed his sword at Chen Ku. An uproar arose in the surroundings when they witnessed this scene. They're going to make a move just like that? Chen Ku was also taken aback. He didn't expect that the other party would make a move so directly. He didn't even say any opening remarks. This guy doesn't care about martial ethics. When Chen Ku came to his senses, Yi Xian's sword had already reached his head. Even though she was caught off guard, Chen Ku's reaction was still extremely swift. Her hands suddenly pressed forward, and this press forcefully stopped Yi Xian's sword. Right at this moment, Yi Xian's hand that held the azure sword suddenly spun. Chen Ku's pupils constricted abruptly while he was shocked in his heart. Because he noticed that the sword before him was extraordinarily sharp, and his body and strength were utterly unable to resist it. He immediately let go of it, but it was already too late. His palms were directly sliced off, causing blood to spray. After his palms were sliced off, Chen Ku was shocked. He lightly tapped his right foot on the ground and floated backwards. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword slashed down once more. It was like a thunderclap that didn't give him a chance to catch his breath. In the face of this terrifying sword, Chen Ku knew that he could not face it head-on, because Yi Xian's sword was too sharp. However, he had lost the initiative and could not dodge at all, so he could only choose to face it head-on. A ruthless glint flashed in Chen Ku's eyes. He stomped his right foot, and a phantom soared into the sky from his body, directly colliding with Yi Xian's sword. Rumble. Yi Xian slashed down with his sword, and the illusory figure was torn apart. However, Chen Ku had already retreated dozens of feet. He looked at Yi Xian and slowly raised his hands. In an instant, the space in front of him trembled violently. At the same time, the surrounding space-time gradually became illusory. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned slightly. He felt somewhat uneasy and was about to attack. Let's make the first move. But at this moment, Chen Ku's body disappeared. In the distance, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He slashed down with his sword, but when his sword slashed down, he slashed empty air. At the same time, he found that he was no longer on the divine martial arena, but in an unknown world. This world was chaotic. He couldn't see the sky or the earth. Everything around him was hazy and unreal. Below the divine martial arena, someone exclaimed, "The world of true self." A true expert at the realm of true self meant that he had cultivated a world of true self. In this world, he was the ruler, and he could suppress everyone in all aspects. Therefore, an expert at the realm of true self could absolutely suppress an expert below the realm of true self. Obviously, Chen Ke found out that Yi Xian was not at the realm of true self, so he directly displayed the world of true self. At this moment, Chen Ke suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian like a ghost. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Swish! Space was torn apart. Meanwhile, Chen Ke vanished mysteriously. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly turned around and stabbed with his sword. At the instant he stabbed with his sword, he noticed to his astonishment that the might of his sword had actually decreased greatly. Meanwhile, a fist smashed onto his sword. Rumble. An expanse of sword light shattered. Yi Xian retreated over 10 kilometers away along with his sword. As soon as he stopped moving, he noticed that countless afterimages had suddenly appeared in the surroundings. It's all Chen Ke's doing. Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly when he witnessed this scene. He knew that he was within a barrier that was similar to the spirit domain. His strength was suppressed within this barrier, whereas Chen Ke's strength had increased. If he wanted to defeat Chen Ke, then he had to first destroy this barrier. When he thought up to here, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and then he opened his palm. The azure sword in his hand trembled violently, and then it carried along countless strands of sword intent that shot into the sky. Sword destruction. Hiss. The azure sword shot into the sky and tore all along the way. In an instant, an enormous hole had been torn open above Yi Xian, and he saw the divine martial arena through this hole. The real world. Right at this moment, countless afterimages had flashed towards Yi Xian. His strongest attack. Chen Ke was clearly aware that the world of true self couldn't stop Yi Xian, who possessed a divine sword. So, he decisively attacked with all his strength. Yi Xian gazed at the azure sword that was above him. At this moment, it was too late for him to withdraw his sword, and he didn't intend to do so. Because even without the azure sword, Yi Xian was still a formidable swordsman. Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, and then he raised his hands. Rise! In an instant, countless strands of sword intent transformed into numerous swords that shot into the sky. Head on. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire world of true self trembled violently, and a series of explosions resounded. Not long after, the entire world of true self began to shatter. Not long after, Yi Xian and Chen Ke appeared on the divine martial arena. Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand, and his clothes fluttered in the wind, looking very elegant. Chen Ke, on the other hand, was covered in sword scars, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. He was in a sorry state. Yi Xian lightly smiled. Thanks for letting me win. Thanks for letting me win. As soon as these words came out, the crowd was in an uproar. Everyone was completely dumbfounded. Lost? Chen Ke actually dared to lose? Mo Ling was also stunned. Lost just like that? It shouldn't be. Earlier, she sent Yi Xian flying with one punch. And her strength was actually lower than Chen Ke's. Just a little bit weaker. This wasn't normal. Opposite Yi Xian, Chen Ke was also dumbfounded. Did I lose? Of course, he hadn't lost. He just seemed to be in a sorry state. Yi Xian lightly smiled. Brother Chen, if you continue, then it'll be a life and death battle. I think you're not bad, so I'll stop today. Let's fight another day. As he spoke, he opened his palm and a bottle of pills floated slowly towards Chen Ke. Brother Chen, there's a top-grade healing pill in this bottle. You're heavily injured, so don't force yourself. Quickly take it. We'll meet again in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and flew on his sword, and he vanished in the blink of an eye. Chen Ku gazed at the pill before him with a dumbfounded expression. What's that? The others gazed at Chen Ku with strange expressions. Did Chen Ku lose or not? Meanwhile, Chen Ku suddenly spoke with a dazed expression. Who is he? How could he? Yi Xian returned to the training field from which he had just arrived. He lay on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. He recalled the battle from before. He realized that he was still lacking in many areas. Especially in the world of true self, he'd been injured. However, his recovery speed was too fast. Moreover, he'd changed into a robe before coming out. Chen Ku naturally didn't think about it. Yi Xian looked at the azure sword in his hand. He realized that without Arya's battle armor, his battle strength was much weaker, and he couldn't use brute force. If he didn't have the azure sword, it would be difficult for him to break through the world of true self. Yi Xian sighed softly. It seemed that he'd been living too comfortably these past few days. Meanwhile, Mo Ling suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side. She leaned over to look at Yi Xian and smiled. You seem to be quite good at fighting. Yi Xian smiled. In any case, I can't defeat you. Mo Ling shook her head. You're stronger than I imagined. You're showing weakness to me. Yi Xian smiled. Mo Ling, can I ask you something? Mo Ling nodded. Sure. Yi Xian said in a low voice, the spiritual qi in your world is already so exhausted, but why are there so many experts here? Mo Ling shook her head. We have many top experts, but there aren't many middle and lower level experts. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. The boundless universe concentrated all its resources on those outstanding people, and those below. Mo Ling suddenly asked, what about your side? Are there still many experts now? Yi Xian was silent. Compared to the boundless universe, the experts of the current universe were definitely much weaker. The most direct reason was that after the myriad races, there was a gap in civilization. Now, the strongest powers in the entire universe should be his Guanxian Academy, the Yang Clan, and the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Mo Ling suddenly said, what level do you belong to on your side? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, under 3 swords, I'm invincible. Mo Ling frowned. In other words, you're in the top 4 amongst the swordsmen on your side? Yi Xian nodded, yes. Mo Ling smiled lightly, that's not bad. This means that the Sword Dao civilization on your side isn't that high. Ha. Yi Xian. Chapter 24:30. Yi Xian didn't continue chatting with Mo Ling, and he slowly closed his eyes. Comprehension. After he arrived here, he noticed that he seemed to have become a little brother again. I have to improve my strength. At the side, Mo Ling glanced at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. After a long time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. He opened his palm, and a strand of sword intent surged out from the center of his palm. Mortal World Sword Intent. The Mortal World Sword Intent had become much stronger. It was growing stronger at all times. Right at this moment, Mo Ling suddenly said, your sword intent is really not bad. Yi Xian smiled, it's formidable, right? Mo Ling nodded, it's very good. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Right at this moment, a white-robed old man suddenly appeared here. The white-robed old man glanced at Mo Ling and said, Mo Ling, the martial monarch wants to see him. Mo Ling hurriedly said, all right. Elder Deshan, take him with you. The white-robed old man hesitated for a moment, and then he said, the martial monarch wants you to take him with you. Mo Ling's face instantly sank when she heard this. The white-robed old man smiled lightly, the martial monarch really thinks highly of you. Mo Ling sighed softly, I can't play happily again. As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian, let's go. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded, all right. Martial Monarch. Mo Ling led Yi Xian towards the distance. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly took out a candied fruit and passed it to Mo Ling. Here. Mo Ling glanced at Yi Xian, and she didn't refuse. She took the candied fruit and started licking it. Yi Xian smiled. Mo Ling, is your martial monarch's temper good? Mo Ling shook her head, not very good. Yi Xian remained silent. Mo Ling smiled, don't try to be flashy in front of her. The martial monarch is a ruthless person of few words, and he might be killed by a single punch from you. Yi Xian nodded, I'm an honest person. Mo Ling laughed, you're not honest at all, you're really scheming. Yi Xian was speechless. Not long after, Mo Ling brought Yi Xian to a huge stone door. This stone door was thousands of feet tall and hundreds of feet wide. Standing in front of the stone door, a feeling of insignificance arose involuntarily. At this time, Mo Ling suddenly bowed towards the stone door with a sincere expression. Yi Xian was a little curious. Mo Ling, where are we? Yi xt Xian say, Yi Xian Mo Ling, t. Mo Ling led Yi Xian into the stone door. As soon as they entered the stone door, the two appeared on a lonely mountain. This lonely mountain was tens of thousands of feet tall, like a giant sword standing between the heavens and the earth. It was extremely spectacular. Martial Lord. Mo Ling bowed deeply to the purple-robed lady. Greetings, Martial Monarch. The Martial Lord nodded slightly and did not speak. Mo Ling stood respectfully at the side, not daring to speak. Yi Xian glanced at Martial Monarch, then slowly walked towards him. Seeing that, Mo Ling's expression suddenly changed, she immediately pulled Yi Xian back and shook her head. Yi Xian laughed, if Martial Monarch wanted to kill me, he wouldn't have brought me here. As he spoke, he slowly walked in front of the Martial Lord. At that moment, he looked straight at the Martial Lord. It had to be said that the woman was also extremely beautiful. Her facial features were exquisite, without a single flaw. Flaws. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly smiled, Martial Monarch is so beautiful. Hearing this, Mo Ling's face suddenly changed as she looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. Did this fellow not want to live anymore? He actually dared to show off in front of a martial monarch? The martial monarch slowly opened her eyes, she raised her head and looked at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian laughed, Martial Monarch personally went to the current universe and brought me here, I wonder why? The martial monarch suddenly punched out, and before Yi Xian could react, he was punched in the abdomen. Bang! Yi Xian's body bent like a bow, his eyes were wide open, his entire body felt as if his tendons and bones were dislocated, he was in extreme pain. Moreover, his entire body did not fly out, but remained in his original position. The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian, I can't kill you, but I can still beat you up. Yi Xian. After speaking, she suddenly stood up and grabbed Yi Xian's shoulder. In an instant, she brought Yi Xian to a graveyard. Yi Xian was slightly confused, why did this woman bring him here? This graveyard was extremely large, there were hundreds of thousands of tombs. The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian, kneel. Yi Xian was stunned at first, then laughed, kneel? Yi Xian, don't even kneel to my father, I. The martial monarch's right hand suddenly pressed down on Yi Xian. Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian's legs weakened, and he almost knelt down. At this moment, Yi Xian roared, and a human sword intent surged out of his body, but as soon as this sword intent appeared, it was directly annihilated. Yi Xian roared, and the crazy demon bloodline in his body surged, but in the next moment, a terrifying power directly penetrated into his body, and his crazy demon bloodline was instantly suppressed. Yi Xian's legs bent, and he left the ground a bit more. Yi Xian clenched his fists, and his facial features twisted. He gritted his teeth, and at this moment, all the bones in his body were cracking bit by bit. The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian expressionlessly, and his right hand suddenly pressed down. Boom! An extremely terrifying power directly pressed down on Yi Xian, and the moment when Yi Xian was about to kneel down, he suddenly roared and punched himself in the chest. Rumble. His physical body was completely destroyed. Self-destructing his physical body. After his physical body self-destructed, the terrifying power still did not disappear, and his soul still maintained a kneeling posture. At this moment, without the slightest hesitation, Yi Xian directly chose to burn his soul. Boom! Yi Xian's soul burned, and it was disappearing at an extremely terrifying speed. Seeing this, the martial monarch slightly frowned, but she did not stop. She wanted to see if Yi Xian really dared to choose to destroy his soul. And Yi Xian did not have the slightest intention to stop. His soul burned crazily, and in a short period of time, his soul burned like a wisp of green smoke. Just when Yi Xian was about to completely disappear, the martial monarch suddenly retracted her right hand, and the destructive power in Yi Xian's soul receded like a tide, and Yi Xian's soul slumped to the ground. The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian. You still have some backbone. Yi Xian looked at the martial monarch, and his eyes were blood red. He did not say any harsh words. He felt that saying harsh words when he could not beat someone was a sign of incompetence. But today's humiliation, he, Yi Xian, would never forget it for the rest of his life. The martial monarch turned to look at the tombs. These are all the people who died in the conquest of the current universe. None of my business. Yi Xian suddenly said fiercely, you invaded the current universe, and only you are allowed to kill others, but others are not allowed to kill you? Again. Even if you are killed, what does it have to do with me? Ah. The martial monarch turned to look at Yi Xian, and frowned. Yi Xian smiled. The first time, you wanted to kill me. Just now, you also wanted to kill me, but you didn't. Why? It's not that you don't want to kill me, but you don't dare to. Isn't that right? The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian. So you have nothing to fear? Yi Xian slowly stood up, and he looked at the martial monarch. I don't care what grudges you have with Master Dedeabi or the current universe, I only know that you have a grudge with me now. Woman, let me tell you, either you kill me now, or I will slaughter your great spirit clan in the future. Cowering? Could cowering save his life? No. If this woman wanted to kill him, no matter how cowardly he was, he wouldn't be able to save his life. But this woman wanted to kill him, but didn't. There were two possibilities. One was that he was useful, and the other was that she didn't dare to kill him. And he purposely provoked this woman, to see why she didn't kill him. The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian, the killing intent in his eyes almost tangible. But he still didn't make a move, and his right hand slowly clenched. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, I'm joking, don't take it seriously. After that, he laid down, and closed his eyes, and started to heal himself. The martial monarch glanced at Yi Xian, retracted his gaze, and turned to walk away. On the spot, Yi Xian closed his eyes, and clenched his fists. Hate. Yi Xian didn't hate her, he only hated himself. He hated himself for not being strong enough, hated himself for being useless. All the misfortune and humiliation were caused by his own lack of ability. The martial monarch came to the depths of the graveyard. In the depths of the graveyard, there was a huge tomb. In front of the tomb, there was a stone tablet, Boundless Lord. The owner of this tomb was the previous Boundless Lord. And back then, this Boundless Lord died in battle for the Boundless Universe, and also bought time for the Boundless Universe. In front of this tomb, stood a skinny old man. The old man said softly, Martial Monarch. Come and pay your respects to the Lord too. The martial monarch looked at the stone tablet in front of him, and said nothing. The old man turned to look, and then said, That young man is the current destined one? The martial monarch nodded. The old man's eyes flashed coldly. Once this person dies, the master of Dedeabi will no longer be able to control everything. The martial monarch shook his head, not yet. The old man frowned, and a moment later, his eyes flashed with doubt. This person has great karma. The martial monarch nodded. The martial monarch was silent. The martial monarch slowly closed his eyes. Let's wait for the shaman to come back and see if she has a way to get rid of this karma. Then, she turned to the old man. Tomb Master, I need to go into seclusion for a while. During this time, don't let him be killed. The Tomb Master suddenly said, those two women. The martial monarch shook his head. The emperor and Sang Sheng will deal with them. Then, she turned and left. After Yi Xian's injuries were healed, he stood up and left the graveyard. He didn't choose to run, because he knew he couldn't. He came to the divine martial arena again, and without any nonsense, he jumped onto the divine martial arena and started to challenge Chen Ku. Chen Ku appeared on the divine martial arena, and he glanced at Yi Xian. Without any nonsense, he decisively threw a punch at Yi Xian. Obviously, after the loss last time, he had learned to be smart. Chapter 24:31. Fight. Now, Yi Xian yearned for battle. Only through battle could he become stronger. Yi Xian's expression was calm when he saw Chen Ku's fist coming at him, and then he suddenly vanished on the spot. Hiss. A strand of sword light tore through the arena. The space on the divine martial arena was actually very strong, and it was personally reinforced by the experts of the boundless universe. However, the azure profound sword was too sharp, and even this strengthened space was easily torn apart. Bang! A strand of sword light suddenly exploded on the divine martial arena, and then Yi Xian and Chen Ku retreated repeatedly. As they retreated, Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and then numerous swords condensed from sword intent suddenly appeared around Chen Ku, and then they slashed at Chen Ku from a strange angle. The swords were extremely swift, and they arrived before Chen Ku in the blink of an eye. Chen Ku's reaction wasn't slow. At the instant that the sword intent appeared, his figure shook, and then he transformed into numerous afterimages that shot out explosively. Bang! 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 Four afterimages smashed directly onto the sword light, and then the sword light shattered. At this moment, a sword suddenly stabbed out another afterimage. Bang! The four afterimages suddenly merged into one, and then they retreated explosively to the edge of the divine martial arena. After Chen Ku stopped, he raised his head to look at Yi Xian in the distance. At this moment, there was a wisp of seriousness in his eyes. Right at this moment, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Chen Ku's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw this, and he slowly clenched his right hand. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and then he opened his left palm and gently guided it. Bang! In an instant, a strand of terrifying sword intent surged out from within him like a tide. Yi Xian said, "Condense." Bang! In an instant, countless strands of sword intent transformed into swords, and in the blink of an eye, there were over 10,000 swords around him. Yi Xian looked at Chen Ku in the distance, and then he directly vanished on the spot. Hiss! A strand of sword light tore through the air, and then 10,000 rays of sword light flew out in unison. Multitasking. In the distance, a wisp of ruthlessness flashed in Chen Ku's eyes. He suddenly stomped his right foot, raised his right hand, and then slammed it down. Boom! A gigantic palm print swept down in front of him. When this palm descended, it was as if it wanted to shatter the entire world. It was extremely terrifying. Rumble. Suddenly, a world-shaking explosion resounded, and then countless rays of light erupted in front of Chen Ku, causing the entire divine martial arena to quake. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Not long after, under the gazes of the crowd, flying swords shuttled through the divine martial arena like butterflies. Tearing sounds and sword cries resounded ceaselessly. Just like that, after an unknown amount of time, the countless flying swords on the divine martial arena suddenly gathered together and slashed down. Rumble. As the sword fell, an afterimage retreated to the edge of the divine martial platform and slammed into the barrier at the edge of the divine martial platform. The entire divine martial platform shook violently. Everyone looked at the divine martial arena in shock. Had the winner been decided? On the divine martial arena, in the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm, and countless flying swords flew back to his hand. Then, he turned around and left. On the other hand, an expanse of sword light dispersed in the distance, and everyone was stunned when they saw Chen Ku. At this moment, Chen Ku's entire body was densely covered in sword marks, and it was an extremely shocking sight. Moreover, an intense sword was even pressed against the center of Chen Ku's forehead. Defeated. Seeing this scene, countless people below the divine martial arena fell into silence. Chen Ku, ranked 36th, was finally defeated. Because Chen Ku was ranked last, every challenger would challenge him first, and Chen Ku had not been defeated for decades. It had been years since he was defeated. On the divine martial arena, Chen Ku took a deep breath. There was no discouragement in his eyes, only determination. He turned around and left. Everyone knew that Chen Ku would definitely come again soon. Yi Xian came to a quiet starry sky. He lifted his head and took a look. He could feel someone was still watching him. Yi Xian smiled coldly and withdrew his gaze. His principle was that if people didn't offend him, he wouldn't offend them. Now that the boundless universe offended him, he, Yi Xian, was not a kind person. A moment later, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, sat cross-legged on the ground, and began to break through to the unfettered realm. Now, he had enough money. All he lacked was time. Although he had the universe vein, he still didn't dare to use it. It was too precious. If he used it here, it might be robbed. Therefore, he chose to burn the universe vein. And he clearly felt that the universe vein wasn't enough for his current realm. While Yi Xian was cultivating, the experts of the boundless universe didn't stop him. Qing Qiu had returned to the entrance of the boundless universe. It wasn't that she wasn't worried about Yi Xian, but it was just as Daebi's master had said. Yi Xian could be allowed to grow on his own. In any case, Yi Xian's life wouldn't be in any danger. Unless Daebi's master wanted to take him down with her. On this day, a woman arrived at the entrance of the boundless universe. It was Ding Xiaoyao, and there was another woman by her side. It was Situ Tingyun. Situ Tingyun gazed at Ding Xiaoyao. Xiaoyao, can you contact Martial Godin? Ding Xiaoyao shook her head. Situ Tingyun frowned slightly. Ding Xiaoyao slowly closed her eyes. We have 62 true self-realm experts right now. Shaoan can be considered to be the strongest amongst us besides Yang Yi. However, she didn't contact me after she went there, so she definitely encountered some trouble. Obviously, the martial Dao civilization in the boundless universe far surpasses ours. She frowned when she spoke up to this point. We must make some preparations. Situ Tingyun spoke solemnly. 3 swords. Ding Xiaoyao shook her head. We can't place all our hopes on 3 swords. Especially when we can't even contact Yang Yi this time. A wisp of worry flashed through her eyes as she spoke up to this point. Looks like the boundless universe isn't ordinary at all. Moreover, Master Daebi's frequent appearances might not be a good thing. Situ Tingyun fell silent for a short while before she said, then in your opinion, what should we do now? Ding Xiaoyao thought about it and said, immediately gather all the experts in the universe, especially those from the era of the myriad races. As far as I know, although the myriad races from the era of the myriad races were heavily injured, there are still some who survived. We must find these people as soon as possible, gather all the experts from the era of the myriad races, integrate them, and improve them once again. When she spoke up to this point, she turned around to gaze at Situ Tingyun. Besides that, go look for Qing Qiu and ask him to use Xiao Ta to help all the swordsmen of the Yang clan. Ask him to help all the swordsmen attain the true self-realm as soon as possible. Besides that, ask him to guide all the swordsmen of the Yang clan in the Sword Dao. Situ Tingyun nodded. She had no doubt that Qing Qiu's attainments in the Sword Dao were the strongest beneath the 3 swords. Ding Xiaoyao continued, besides that, we must contact two people. One is the master of Tendo, Miss Nian Nian, and the other is Tuesday. Situ Tingyun spoke solemnly. Do you know where they are? Ding Xiaoyao replied, Miss Nian Nian is cultivating diligently in Tendo City. Go there yourself and tell her that you need her help. She'll come. Situ Tingyun nodded. What about Tu? Ding Xiaoyao fell silent for a short while, and then she shook her head. I don't know where she is as well. However, she'll definitely show herself if Yi Xian is in danger. There's another one as well. Situ Tingyun nodded. Without saying anything else, she turned and left. Ding Xiaoyao looked at the entrance to the boundless universe in the distance, and a hint of worry flashed through her eyes. In an unknown part of the starry sky, a woman in a white dress sat cross-legged on the ground, and a sword hovered in front of her. After an unknown period of time, the woman in the white dress suddenly opened her eyes, and the sword in front of her violently trembled. Rumble. In an instant, millions of unknown dead starfields were turned into dust. The woman in the white dress slowly stood up and opened her palm. Come. Chi. A sword suddenly pierced through countless spacetime, and in the next moment, a sword light landed firmly in the woman in the white dress's right hand. There were two words engraved on the body of the sword, rebirth. The woman in the white dress looked into the distance and said softly, Brother, she was Shao Qi. She was also Destiny in the white dress. She had finally awakened completely. Elsewhere, a woman stood silently in front of a cave. She wore a tight-fitting robe, and there was a wine gourd at her waist. She just looked at the cave in front of her. After a long time, the woman in the white dress took a big gulp from the wine gourd at her waist, and then said softly, Brother, in this life, I will protect you. After saying that, she turned around and left, and her tightly clenched fists suddenly loosened. In the next moment, a sword flew out of nowhere and landed firmly in her hand. The butcher who no longer practiced boxing. In the boundless universe. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, the aura around him was getting stronger and stronger, and the space around him had begun to fluctuate intensely. It was extremely terrifying. This time, he did not rely on Xiao Ta and Dedeabi. Just like that, about half a month later, Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes. Boom! In an instant, a terrifying aura swept out from his body, and in an instant, the space around him began to fluctuate violently, as if there was a huge earthquake. It was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian stood up, opened his palm, and the Qingxian sword appeared in his hand. At the same time, countless sword intents of the human world surged out of his body like a tide, and finally into his Qingxian sword. After a moment, he suddenly slashed down with the sword. Hiss! A huge hole was directly torn open in the heavens and the earth. The unfettered realm. At this moment, he had attained the unfettered realm from the high god realm. Yi Xian took a deep breath, and then he lightly waved the sword in his hand. In an instant, countless sword intents soared into the sky from within his body. The sword intents of the human world. At this moment, the sword intents around him had greatly strengthened. Looking at the sword intents around him, Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he turned around and left. In a short while, Yi Xian arrived at the divine martial arena. Meanwhile, Chen Ku appeared on the arena, and he looked at Yi Xian again. Yi Xian nodded. Are you ready? Chen Ku looked directly at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Hiss! A strand of sword light tore through the arena. In the distance, Chen Ku's pupils constricted, and he suddenly raised his arms to block. Boom! A strand of sword light suddenly exploded, and then, under everyone's gazes, Chen Ku was directly blasted to the boundary. As soon as he stopped, both his arms were shattered, and a sword was directly pressed against the center of his forehead. He was completely defeated by 2 sword strikes. Below the divine martial arena, there was complete silence. Chen Ku looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. You? How is this possible? Yi Xian's expression was calm, the strongest under the 3 swords. Do you think I'm bragging? How naive. Everyone. Chapter 24:32. The strongest person below the 3 swords. Everyone was dumbfounded because they didn't know the 3 swords at all. On the divine martial arena, Chen Ku was completely dumbfounded. Because he realized that Yi Xian's strength had undergone a tremendous change. In fact, the moment Yi Xian attacked, he already felt the change in Yi Xian's strength. However, he didn't expect Yi Xian's strength to be so strong. Now, he also realized that Yi Xian had attained freedom from the high god realm. Chen Ku suddenly came to his senses. At this moment, he realized that when Yi Xian fought him, Yi Xian was only at the high god realm. But he was at the true self realm. An entire 3 realms higher than him, but Yi Xian actually defeated him. Thinking of this, the disbelief in Chen Ku's eyes turned into horror. This young swordsman from a foreign land actually defeated him at the high god realm. An entire 3 realms higher. It wasn't just Chen Ku, many people below the divine martial arena noticed this as well, and their faces were filled with shock. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the green profound sword flew back into his hand. He walked to the 35th stone pillar. On the stone pillar, there were 2 large words, Lin Feng. And below it, there was another line of words, 300,000 universe veins. 300,000 universe veins. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a spatial ring slowly floated to the stone pillar. A moment later, the stone pillar trembled slightly, and then a man slowly walked out of the stone pillar. The man wore a loose robe and held a spear in his right hand. Lin Feng. Ranked 35th on the divine martial list. Lin Feng put away the spatial ring in front of him, and then he looked at Yi Xian in the distance. Without any nonsense, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. Swish! The space in front of Yi Xian suddenly exploded, and in the next moment, a cold light directly pierced the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. Rumble. With a loud bang, Lin Feng was pushed back hundreds of feet by Yi Xian's sword. After Lin Feng stopped, he looked at the long spear in his hand. With a cracking sound, the long spear broke into pieces. Seeing his spear shatter, Lin Feng was stunned. In the next moment, he looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. Chi! A ray of sword light tore through the battlefield. In the distance, Lin Feng's expression instantly changed drastically. His body trembled and he was about to retreat. However, Yi Xian's sword was even faster. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived before him, leaving him with nowhere to retreat. Lin Feng stopped retreating. His palms suddenly overlapped each other and then pulled upwards. In an instant, countless spear shadows soared into the sky, directly enveloping him and Yi Xian. Boom! Right at this moment, an enormous bang suddenly resounded from the divine martial arena, and then countless spear images were blasted apart. At the same time, a figure was blasted flying and smashed heavily against the barrier. This figure was Lin Feng. Just as Lin Feng smashed into the barrier, a sword suddenly pressed against his forehead. It was over. Below the divine martial arena, there was dead silence. Lin Feng was defeated just like that. Everyone was still somewhat unable to accept the reality before their eyes. The powerful Lin Feng was actually defeated in just 2 moves. On the divine martial arena, Lin Feng glanced at the azure profound sword in Yi Xian's hand and remained silent. He knew that the reason he lost so quickly was largely because of this sword. It was because he couldn't block this sword at all. Of course, a loss was a loss. Lin Feng glanced at Yi Xian. I've lost. With that, he turned around and left. Lost. Below the divine martial arena, everyone looked at Yi Xian with complicated expressions. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked at the 34th person. A stone pillar. Witnessing this scene, someone exclaimed, he wants to challenge Wu Qing. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the spatial ring slowly floated in front of the stone pillar. Not long after, the stone pillar slightly trembled, and soon, a man slowly walked out of the stone pillar. Wu Qing. 34th on the divine martial ranking. Wu Qing looked at Yi Xian. Swordsman. Yi Xian nodded. Wu Qing nodded slightly. Come, let me see a genius from the other side. As soon as he finished speaking, his body suddenly became illusory. In the distance, Yi Xian slightly frowned and blocked with his sword. Boom! A red thread that was as thin as a hair blasted against the azure profound sword. The azure profound sword trembled violently, and Yi Xian felt his arm go numb. At this moment, a red thread directly appeared between his eyebrows. Very fast. Yi Xian's reaction was also very fast. He dodged sideways and dodged the red thread by a hair's breadth. But at this moment, the space he was in suddenly filled with countless red threads. These red threads were like a net that completely enveloped him. Yi Xian slightly closed his eyes, turned around, and swept the azure profound sword in his hand. Chi! A wave of sword light vibrated, and in an instant, the countless red threads were shattered. At this moment, countless red threads suddenly appeared all around. These red threads were dense and endless, and they covered the entire divine martial arena. Yi Xian's expression was calm. He opened his palm, and the azure profound sword suddenly flew out. At the same time, countless human sword intents turned into swords and slashed out. Chi! In an instant, the entire divine martial arena was filled with scalp-numbing tearing sounds. Countless red threads and sword lights crisscrossed, dazzling the audience's eyes. Even though the red threads were boundless, Yi Xian's sword was even sharper, and it caused the red threads to be unable to approach him at all. Right when they were in a deadlock, Wu Qing suddenly vanished on the spot, and then the space in the surroundings suddenly became illusory. The realm of true self. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. A moment later, he suddenly rushed forward and slashed down with his sword. Chi! A sword light slashed down. Boom! Suddenly, Wu Qing's realm of true self shattered, and at the same time, countless red threads were annihilated. Wu Qing was shocked, and he was about to retreat, but at this moment, a ray of sword light had already arrived between his eyebrows. The entire divine martial arena regained its calm. Wu Qing was defeated. At this moment, the audience no longer had the disbelief they had before. Only mixed feelings remained. Yi Xian's strength was stronger than they had expected. Wu Qing looked at Yi Xian. I lost. Yi Xian opened his palm, put away the green profound sword, and then turned to leave. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, Yi Xian disappeared at the end of the horizon. In the arena, the audience looked at each other. They knew that Yi Xian would definitely come again. Somewhere, an old man watched Yi Xian disappear in the distance, and he was silent. This old man was the tomb owner. He didn't stop Yi Xian from challenging the divine martial arena because Yi Xian was the top genius of the current universe. Now, letting a genius of the boundless universe compete with Yi Xian was not a bad thing. However, the speed at which Yi Xian's strength increased was a bit beyond his expectations. And he also found one thing. That was, Yi Xian was challenging people at a higher level. After a moment of silence, the tomb owner turned to leave. He still didn't choose to stop Yi Xian. He wanted to see how great Yi Xian's potential was. In any case, the geniuses on the divine martial list that Yi Xian was challenging were not the best in the boundless universe. Yi Xian came to a starry sky. He sat down cross-legged and slowly closed his eyes. Get up. He found that he didn't need to rely on sword skills when fighting with others. He just relied on pure strength and speed. As long as he was strong enough and fast enough, it was better than some sword skills. Of course, instant of invincibility was still his strongest sword skill. Yi Xian looked around. He knew that someone was secretly watching him. However, the opponent was too strong, and he couldn't feel him. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Enlightenment. Every day, besides fighting crazily, he was enlightenment. Fighting could make his reaction speed faster, because only in a moment of life and death could a person better stimulate his potential. After the battle, he needed to comprehend again. He needed to comprehend his opponent, himself, and the sword Dao. In the starry sky, Yi Xian closed his eyes. Around him, the mortal world's sword intent floated. His current use of the mortal world's sword intent was far better than before. He also found that there were many wonderful things about it. The mortal world's sword intent was the power of faith. To a certain extent, it couldn't be considered his own strength. Because if others no longer believed in him, the mortal world's sword intent would disappear. Thinking of this, Yi Xian frowned slightly. The people believed in him. Then what did he believe in? Qing. Yi Xian fell silent. No. This method wasn't right. He should believe in himself and not pin his faith on others. Just like now, if Qing wasn't here, what should he do? He could only believe in himself. If he didn't believe in himself, how could others believe in him? Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly used the heart clarity divine power. Boom! Suddenly, the mortal world's sword intent around Yi Xian started seething. At this moment, his mortal world's sword intent gained another strand of faith, and it wasn't someone else's but his own. True self? Such a thought suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Wasn't the so-called true self about understanding one's heart, subduing it, and believing in it? A short moment later, Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and smiled. Bang! The mortal world's sword intent surged out madly from within Yi Xian's body, and it was gradually undergoing a qualitative change. The end of the path of faith was oneself. Moreover, he'd actually understood this principle by accident. Yi Xian calmed himself down and waited for his sword intent to break through. He knew that he'd be at the true self realm when his sword intent broke through. Right at this moment, a man suddenly appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. The man sized up Yi Xian and said, "You're that Yi Xian from the other world." Yi Xian glanced at the man and didn't say a word. The man sneered, "Let me introduce myself. I'm Zhang Ming, ranked 30th on the divine martial list. I heard that you're pretty good, so I'm here too." The green profound sword floating in front of Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The man's pupils suddenly constricted, and he charged forward and punched out. Boom! A wave of sword light exploded, and the man was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. As soon as the man stopped, an intense sword was already pressed against his forehead. Zhang Ming was stunned. Yi Xian glanced at the dumbfounded Zhang Ming. "Do you think that I'm very weak?" Zhang Ming. P.S. Thank you for the generous rewards this month from Vast Deep Mist. Brother, you've given too many rewards. I sincerely thank you. I'm very ashamed. You single-handedly ensured that I'm in the top 10, and all the readers' rewards and support, thank you. Recently, I've been slowly adjusting, and I won't add more. I hope to write a better one. Even if I want to end, I won't end it hastily. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2433. It had to be said that Zhang Ming was dumbfounded. One sword. He did not expect Yi Xian's sword attack to be so powerful that it directly shattered his right hand. He did not expect that the person in front of him was actually so powerful. Without thinking much, Zhang Ming quickly said, "I've lost." Admit defeat. He had to admit defeat. After all, it wasn't a battle of life and death. There was no need to be stubborn. Plus, he had really lost. If he couldn't win, he would be courting death. He didn't want to die yet. Seeing that Zhang Ming had admitted defeat, Yi Xian didn't waste any more words. He opened his palm and the sword between Zhang Ming's eyebrows flew back into his hand. Zhang Ming glanced at Yi Xian, his eyes full of fear. He didn't say anything and turned to leave. Somewhere in the dark, the tomb owner looked at Yi Xian in silence. How could he not see that Yi Xian was trying to break through to the realm of true self? He was actually a bit shocked. One should know that when Yi Xian came, he was only at the upper immortal realm. But now, Yi Xian was about to reach the realm of true self. Moreover, he was going to skip the virtual self realm. Could it be played like this? The tomb owner looked at Yi Xian in the distance with a calm expression. Yi Xian was excellent, but there were many excellent geniuses in the boundless universe. Therefore, he didn't want to kill him. At this moment, in the distance, Yi Xian suddenly stood up slowly. Boom! In an instant, the star region where Yi Xian was at boiled. At that moment, Yi Xian's human realm sword essence also underwent an earth-shattering change. True self. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his eyes slowly. He lifted his head and looked into the distance. He saw the tomb owner right away. Now, he could feel the tomb owner. Seeing Yi Xian look over, the tomb owner's expression was calm. Yi Xian smiled. Then he turned around and left. He didn't attack the tomb owner because even though he had reached the realm of true self, he knew that he was no match for the old man and the martial lord. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the divine martial arena. Seeing Yi Xian come to the divine martial arena again, some of the people guarding the divine martial arena suddenly became excited. Yi Xian was here again. Who is Yi Xian going to challenge this time? Everyone was very curious. Under the gazes of everyone present, Yi Xian opened his palm, and then a spatial ring slowly floated towards one of the stone pillars. When they saw where the spatial ring had landed, everyone's eyes opened wide, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. The first one. Yi Xian wanted to challenge the first on the divine martial list. Number 1 on the divine martial list, Nalan Ming. He had dominated the rankings for countless years, and no one had ever been able to shake him. Nalan Ming. The Nalan clan was one of the 6 great clans of the boundless universe. They were ranked second amongst the 6 great clans, above the ancient spirit clan. Nalan Ming was hailed as the most monstrous genius in the history of the Nalan clan, one of the 2 supreme monstrous geniuses of the boundless universe. No one had expected Yi Xian to challenge Nalan Ming, who ranked first. The tomb owner, who was hiding in the dark, also did not expect this. He was very surprised. The news of Yi Xian challenging Nalan Ming quickly spread, and before long, tens of thousands of people gathered below the divine martial stage. Now that they knew Yi Xian's identity, they knew that he was a genius from a foreign world. Many people's eyes were filled with hatred towards Yi Xian. After all, the boundless universe and the current universe had a tragic war in the past. Under everyone's gazes, the first stone pillar trembled slightly. Very quickly, a woman slowly walked out. The woman was wearing a black, tight-fitting robe. There were no patterns on the entire robe. It was very simple and plain. Her long hair was casually draped over her back. However, the ends of her hair were tied with a ribbon. Her ears were different from ordinary people's, and they were slightly larger. Moreover, her eyes were dark blue. Nalan Ming. In the arena, someone suddenly cheered. Not long after, the crowd erupted. In the eyes of the younger generation, Nalan Ming and Beifong Qin were existences akin to gods. After Nalan Ming walked out, she glanced at Yi Xian with a calm expression. Yi Xian looked at Nalan Ming with a calm expression, but he was secretly on guard because he realized that he could not sense the woman in front of him. It was as if she did not exist. Not simple. Of course, this was exactly what he wanted. Right now, he was no longer interested in acting tough. He only wanted to become stronger. Nalan Ming suddenly walked slowly towards Yi Xian. As soon as her foot landed, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly crushed towards Yi Xian like a mountain. Boom! In an instant, the entire divine martial stage exploded and was annihilated. The entire divine martial stage's enchantment and array formation could not withstand it. In the arena, everyone was shocked and quickly retreated. At this moment, 4 mysterious black-robed men suddenly appeared. The 4 of them raised their hands and gently pressed down. With this pressure, the terrifying aura released by Nalan Ming was immediately restrained in the area of the divine martial stage. In front of Nalan Ming, Yi Xian's expression was calm. He opened his palm, and a wave of sword energy gushed out. Boom! This wave of sword energy forcibly resisted Nalan Ming's aura. However, at this moment, Nalan Ming took another step forward. Boom! The power of the aura suddenly multiplied. It directly doubled. Boom! Yi Xian's sword energy was directly suppressed and forced to retreat. Yi Xian was shocked. He opened his palm, and the opponent's sword energy suddenly gushed out and merged with his own sword energy. Using sword energy as energy. With the addition of the human realm's sword energy, Yi Xian's sword energy instantly increased, and then it once again resisted Nalan Ming's aura. However, at this moment, Nalan Ming took another step forward. Boom! In an instant, the power of the aura doubled again. Boom! At this moment, the 4 mysterious elders were directly forced back thousands of feet. They were shocked and quickly tried to suppress it again. However, they were shocked to find that they could not suppress it at all. As the main target of this aura, Yi Xian's human realm's sword energy was directly crushed. The aura was like the sky falling on Yi Xian. Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian suffocated. His body felt like it was about to be crushed, and he was unable to move. In the distance, Nalan Ming looked at Yi Xian with a calm expression and did not move forward again. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. He opened his palm, and in an instant, countless human realm sword energy surged out of his body. Buzz! The sound of a sword suddenly resounded between the heavens and the earth. In the next moment, Nalan Ming's aura was directly torn open by Yi Xian's human realm sword energy. As soon as this opening was opened, Yi Xian immediately felt his body relax. However, at this moment, Nalan Ming took another step forward. Boom! In an instant, the power of the aura doubled again. Yi Xian's pupils constricted, and his human realm sword energy was forcefully pushed back into his body. At the same time, his body actually started to shatter bit by bit. Yi Xian was extremely shocked. This aura was absolutely the strongest he'd ever seen. As for Qing usually didn't play around like this, and he would always attack anyone he encountered. At this moment, Yi Xian didn't dare hold back any longer, and he directly activated his bloodline. Bang! A powerful bloodline power swept out from his body. When this bloodline power appeared, his human realm's sword intent surged out as well. As soon as they fused together, Nalan Ming's aura was instantly forced back, and the space in the surroundings started to be obliterated bit by bit. Their strength was truly too terrifying, and the space here wasn't able to endure their strength at all. A trace of surprise flashed through Nalan Ming's eyes when she saw Yi Xian's bloodline energy, but she didn't speak and just took another step forward. Bang! Nalan Ming's aura doubled once more. It doubled again. In an instant, Yi Xian's bloodline energy and human realm sword energy were suppressed once more. Yi Xian's face fell when he witnessed this scene. Is this woman really that abnormal? She doubled it with just a single step. Yi Xian's bloodline energy and human realm sword energy were being suppressed to the point of being pushed back repeatedly. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes when he witnessed this scene. Attack? He still hadn't. It didn't take long for Nalan Ming's aura to suppress Yi Xian's bloodline energy and human realm sword energy to arrive before him. At this moment, he could clearly sense how terrifying that aura was. Yi Xian had an extremely solemn expression on his face. If that aura were to press down upon him right now, then his soul would be instantly obliterated. His body and soul were utterly unable to endure such a terrifying force. Right at this moment, Nalan Ming suddenly took another step forward from afar. Rumble. In an instant, that aura suddenly rose explosively, and its might hadn't just doubled, it had multiplied by a few times. Yi Xian's bloodline energy and human realm sword energy were directly suppressed back into his body, and then Yi Xian's pupils constricted. At this moment, he had no choice but to attack, and the green profound sword in his hands suddenly shot into the sky. Hiss. That aura was directly torn apart by the green profound sword. In the next moment, Yi Xian had left the universe and entered another space. At practically the exact same moment, the aura that Nalan Ming emanated pressed down upon him. Bang! Yi Xian's figure trembled violently, but he wasn't harmed at all. At this moment, he was invincible. Instant of invincibility. A trace of surprise flashed through Nalan Ming's eyes when she witnessed this scene, and then she gazed at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. Yi Xian suddenly attacked from afar. Along with the sound of a sword howling, 4 afterimages suddenly appeared around Nalan Ming, and the 4 afterimages fiercely slashed down with swords in their hands. Instant of invincibility. At the instant that the 4 swords slashed down in unison, Nalan Ming suddenly raised her right hand and pressed it down lightly. Rumble. In an instant, the 4 rays of light were blasted apart, and the 4 afterimages were blasted over 30 kilometers away. After they stopped moving, they started to slowly disperse, and it wasn't long before they completely vanished from the field of vision of the spectators. Meanwhile, Yi Xian appeared in front of Nalan Ming. Nalan Ming raised her head to gaze at Yi Xian, and she was just about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Thanks for letting me win." Let me win? Nalan Ming was slightly stunned. Everyone in the surroundings was bewildered. Did he win? Did Yi Xian win? All the spectators were bewildered, and even Nalan Ming was bewildered. Did I lose? Meanwhile, someone in the crowd below spoke abruptly, "Fuck. How shameless." 7017K. Chapter 2434. Needless to say, all the spectators were stunned. What's going on? Has Nalan Ming lost? Obviously, she hasn't. Moreover, Nalan Ming had always been occupying the upper hand in their battle. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian turned around and was about to leave on his sword. However, a terrifying aura suddenly enveloped him. Yi Xian stopped moving, and then he turned around to gaze at Nalan Ming. "What's wrong?" Nalan Ming gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Continue." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Why?" Nalan Ming looked Yi Xian in the eyes and said, "We haven't decided on a victor." Yi Xian grinned and said, "Then let's continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward with the green profound sword in hand. Hiss. As soon as he charged forward, the aura that Nalan Ming emanated was instantly torn apart by a single swing of his sword, and then his sword was like a thunderclap that instantly arrived before Nalan Ming. This strike was capable of obliterating the heavens and the earth. Nalan Ming's expression was calm, and she suddenly flipped her palm open at the instant that his sword slashed down. Bang! The spectators watched as an expanse of sword light shattered, and then Yi Xian retreated explosively by 3 kilometers. Yi Xian hadn't even stopped moving when a fist smashed down towards him. As soon as this fist smashed down, the space in the surroundings started seething, and then it gradually vanished. Everything was obliterated by a single punch. Yi Xian's pupils constricted when he sensed the terrifying strength contained within this punch. If I'm struck by this punch, then I'll probably accompany Tian Yi right away, right? At this critical moment, Yi Xian had no choice but to utilize instant of invincibility again. Because he had nowhere to retreat to, and it was impossible for him to dodge. However, if he were to go head-on against this attack, then even if he didn't die, he would still suffer a horrible fate. This woman's fist was simply too terrifying. As soon as Yi Xian escaped from this expanse of space, the fist had already smashed down, and Yi Xian's body forcefully endured it. Bang! Yi Xian's body trembled violently, but he was not injured in the slightest. Nalan Ming frowned slightly when she witnessed this scene. She knew very well the strength of her punch. Not to mention Yi Xian, it could even shatter a universe. However, Yi Xian was completely unharmed. Right when Nalan Ming was feeling puzzled, 4 afterimages suddenly appeared around her. In the next moment, 4 rays of sword light slashed down. Chi 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 chi. 4 ripping sounds suddenly resounded. Nalan Ming suddenly raised her right hand and then slammed it down. Boom! In an instant, the 4 sword lights were completely shattered. The 4 afterimages were pushed back hundreds of thousands of feet by a frightening force. The moment they stopped, the 4 afterimages were completely destroyed. At the same time, a sword suddenly appeared in front of Nalan Ming. The Azure Profound Sword. Nalan Ming suddenly raised her right hand and made a grabbing motion. Boom! The Azure Profound Sword was actually forcefully caught in her hand. In the distance, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. With a command in his heart, the Azure Profound Sword trembled violently and spun. Nalan Ming frowned slightly. She loosened her grip and moved her body slightly to the side. The Azure Profound Sword flew past the tip of her nose, but in the next moment, the Azure Profound Sword turned around and slashed down again. Nalan Ming suddenly pressed her fingers together, and then she lightly swept them to the right at a strange angle. This sweep actually swept accurately onto the body of the Azure Profound Sword. Bang! The Azure Profound Sword was directly blasted away. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the Azure Profound Sword flew back into his hand. At this moment, Nalan Ming suddenly appeared in front of him like a ghost. She turned around and swept her leg towards Yi Xian. Bang! This sweep caused countless pieces of space to shatter, and the powerful force directly blasted all the spectating experts back 30 kilometers. Yi Xian's pupils constricted. He didn't dare go head-on against this woman's strength, so he immediately utilized his instant of invincibility. Bang! Nalan Ming's leg directly swept onto Yi Xian's shoulder. Rumble! Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled, but he was not injured in the slightest. Almost at the same time, Yi Xian slashed at Nalan Ming's head with his sword. However, this sword slashed empty air, because Nalan Ming did not know when she had already retreated hundreds of meters away. After stopping, Nalan Ming looked at Yi Xian, and her beautiful eyebrows furrowed again. What kind of divine art is this? Yi Xian held the Azure Profound Sword in his hand and waved it gently. The sword light flashed, and he smiled slightly. Instant of invincibility. The moment I draw my sword, I am invincible. Nalan Ming looked at Yi Xian. You created this yourself? Yi Xian thought about it, and then nodded. You can think of it that way. Little soul, Nalan Ming nodded slightly. Very good. But you can't use it infinitely, right? As she spoke, she slowly clenched her right hand, and a terrifying force once again swept towards Yi Xian. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand and slashed down with his sword. Chi! As the sword slashed down, the force was torn apart again, but the next moment, a shadow swept over his head. Nalan Ming lifted her right foot and stomped down. Boom! This stomp seemed to be crushing the entire universe. It was extremely frightening. Yi Xian squinted his eyes and used instant of invincibility again. Boom! Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled, and he once again withstood Nalan Ming's terrifying force. Nalan Ming retreated to a distance. She looked at Yi Xian and frowned. Just as she was about to attack again, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Let's call it a day." As he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared on the spot. Nalan Ming was stunned. He left just like that? Below the divine martial arena, the crowd was also stunned. Did he just call it a day? Was he playing house? Of course, the most important thing was, who won? On the divine martial arena, Nalan Ming looked into the distance and was silent. In fact, she had already felt Yi Xian's true strength. If not for that sword skill, Yi Xian's current strength would not be enough to contend with her. But that sword skill, Nalan Ming frowned deeply. In those few moments just now, Yi Xian had withstood all of her force without a scratch. This was not normal. After a moment of silence, Nalan Ming turned around and left. The news of Yi Xian challenging Nalan Ming quickly spread throughout the boundless universe. One should know that Nalan Ming was one of the two super geniuses in the boundless universe. She was a god in the eyes of the younger generation in the boundless universe. Yet, Yi Xian was able to challenge her. Most importantly, he did not lose. Did Yi Xian lose? It seemed like not. Because Yi Xian ran away while fighting. Therefore, very quickly, the boundless universe spread the news that Yi Xian and Nalan Ming were evenly matched. Moreover, the more it spread, the more ridiculous it became. Some even said that Yi Xian had suppressed Nalan Ming. In short, Yi Xian was now completely famous in the boundless universe. In the starry sky, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, he was a little excited. The reason why he immediately retreated was not because he was afraid of Nalan Ming. Of course, he was also very clear that with his current strength, there was definitely a big gap between him and Nalan Ming. This was because Nalan Ming had not used his full strength since the beginning. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and slowly closed his eyes. The reason why he hurriedly left was because he had a new realization, and that was instant invincibility. He felt that this instant invincibility could be improved. What should he improve? To improve the strength of the 4 afterimages and instant invincibility. Yi Xian suddenly stood up and stabbed out with his sword. His entire body directly escaped from this universe. In the next moment, he directly entered an unknown spacetime domain. In this spacetime domain, Yi Xian glanced around and found that he had not only escaped from the existing universe, but also the boundless universe. This was a strange world. Yi Xian wanted to try to understand this spacetime, but he was shocked to find that his divine sense could not spread out at all. His entire body seemed to be in a black hole. This feeling made him a little panic. What kind of spacetime is this? After a long silence, Yi Xian collected his thoughts and suddenly drew his sword. Instant invincibility. At the moment of the sword strike, he was invincible. At this moment of invincibility, he carefully felt it and soon found that his entire body was shrouded by a mysterious power, but this mysterious power disappeared in an instant. Instant invincibility was not always invincible, but invincible at the moment when he drew his sword. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian looked at the 4 afterimages in the distance. He suddenly appeared in front of the 4 afterimages. When he carefully looked at the 4 afterimages, he was shocked to find that the afterimages were actually him. Himself? Yi Xian was a little confused. Before this, he did not carefully observe the 4 afterimages. He did not expect that the 4 afterimages were actually him. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes and began to try to feel the 4 afterimages. After a moment, he was pleasantly surprised to find that he could actually connect with the 4 afterimages. This was really a great discovery. With a sudden thought from Yi Xian, countless human realm sword intents appeared in the surroundings. These human realm sword intents eventually flowed into the 4 afterimages. Gradually, the 4 afterimages actually dared to condense. Yi Xian was overjoyed and hurriedly released the human realm sword intents in a frenzy. In a short while, the 4 afterimages actually condensed into a solid image that looked exactly like him. It was as if they were clones. Looking at the 4 clones in front of him, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Slash. Slash." As soon as he said that, the 4 clones drew their swords at the same time and slashed. Swish. 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 4 rays of sword light slashed down in a straight line. Wherever the sword light landed, space-time directly exploded. Immediately after, a destructive power erupted, and the surrounding starry sky began to shatter and be annihilated bit by bit. But soon, a terrifying power appeared in the surroundings, and this power directly suppressed the scene. Yi Xian turned his head and glanced at the tomb owner again. The tomb owner was also looking at Yi Xian with a calm expression. Yi Xian retracted his gaze and took a deep breath. He was now sure that his instant of invincibility could be improved in all aspects. Not only that, but the 4 afterimages could also inherit his human realm sword intense. Apart from the human realm sword intense, these clones could also inherit the power of his bloodline. After inheriting his human realm sword intense and the power of his bloodline, the strength of these 4 clones increased by more than a few times. This was a great discovery. At this moment, the martial lord who had disappeared for a long time suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing this woman, Yi Xian slowly held the green profound sword in his right hand. The martial lord glanced at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand, then looked straight at Yi Xian. Please kill me. 7017K. Chapter 2435. Seeking Death. How could Yi Xian tolerate such a temper? Without any nonsense, he suddenly thrust his sword forward. Boom! In an instant, his entire person escaped from this universe, and the next moment, he slashed down with his sword. Instant invincibility. He knew that he only had one chance against the woman in front of him. Therefore, he directly used instant invincibility. 4 clones suddenly appeared around the martial lord, and as Yi Xian slashed down with his sword, the 4 clones also slashed down. This time was different from before. The 4 clones not only had the support of the human realm's sword intent, but also the power of the bloodline. The 4 swords slashed down, destroying heaven and earth. However, the martial lord's expression was still calm. As the 5 swords slashed down, the martial lord suddenly punched out. Boom! A wave of sword light shattered, and the 4 clones disappeared. The leader, Yi Xian, was unharmed, because at that moment, he was in an invincible state. But the next moment, the martial lord punched out again. Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian felt his mind go blank. Then, he was directly sent flying. This time, he flew for hundreds of thousands of feet, and as soon as he stopped, his physical body directly shattered, leaving only his soul. The martial lord took a step forward, and with this step, she directly arrived before Yi Xian's soul. She looked directly at Yi Xian. The person of the mandate of heaven? If you don't have the mandate of heaven, do you think you won't die? With that, she directly disappeared on the spot with Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian arrived on top of a tall tower. This tower was hundreds of thousands of feet tall, and it stretched from the abyss on the ground to the depths of the starry sky. At the top of this tower, there was an altar, and around the edges, there were strange black talismans floating. On the altar stood a woman. She wore a loose robe, and the robe was embroidered with countless strange talismans. Her hair was extremely long, and it was already on the ground. In her hand, she also held a long staff made of an unknown material, and at the top of the staff was a deep black eye. Yi Xian did not see her face, because her back was facing him. The martial lord looked at the woman. Shaman. Shaman. The lady in front of him was the shaman of the boundless universe. In the boundless universe, she had the highest position and was only second to the legendary boundless master. After a long moment of silence, the high priestess slowly turned around. At that moment, Yi Xian saw her face. She was a young woman. Her features weren't peerless, but they weren't ugly either. She was the type that was worth looking at, and the more he looked at her, the more interesting she became. The shaman's gaze landed on Yi Xian and he smiled. The one chosen by the heavens. The voice was very soft, just like the wind, making people feel very comfortable. Yi Xian's expression was calm as he pondered. The position of the priest in front of him seemed to be a bit higher than the martial monarch. The priestess slowly walked in front of Yi Xian. There were many small bells tied to her body, so when she walked, the bells would ring crisply. After the shaman walked in front of Yi Xian, she looked at Yi Xian again, then smiled and said, "The person of destiny." On the side, the martial monarch said in a low voice, "Can we take away his destiny?" After a moment of silence, the shaman opened her palm. To Yi Xian's horror, his right hand uncontrollably fell into the shaman's hand. The shaman slowly closed her eyes. After a long time, she opened them again. Her expression was complicated. "No." The martial monarch frowned. "Why not?" "Terrifying." The martial monarch said in a low voice, "I've felt it too." The shaman said softly, "Martial monarch, this world is bigger and more complicated than we imagined. In this world, other than destiny, there are some people who are beyond the rules of this world." The martial monarch's expression was cold. After that war, all the strongest people in the universe were killed, and their elites were slaughtered by us. Although there are some survivors, they are not strong enough. Over there, only the academy that this person created, the Yang clan, and the Celestial Treasure Pavilion are left. This person is the key. If we kill him. The shaman turned to the martial monarch. "He is more terrifying than the Wan clan." The martial monarch frowned. The shaman looked at Yi Xian. Her right hand was still holding Yi Xian's hand, and she was still caressing Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian wanted to pull his hand back, but to his horror, he couldn't. The shaman looked at Yi Xian. "This person, not just us, even the master of Dedeabi can't do anything to him. The heavenly fate was bestowed upon him by the great Dao Brush's owner, but the fate hidden inside his body surpassed the heavenly fate. Not to mention killing this person, even touching him will bring disaster to the universe." The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian, his right hand slowly clenched. No one knew what he was thinking. The shaman looked at the martial monarch. "Martial monarch, how is your strength compared to the master of Dedeabi?" After a moment of silence, the martial monarch said, "Far from it." Although she was the strongest martial monarch in the history of the Great Spirit Clan, compared to the master of Dedeabi, she was still not enough. The shaman's expression was calm. "A person that even the master of Dedeabi can't do anything to, what makes you think you can kill him?" The martial monarch was silent. The shaman looked at Yi Xian, smiled. "You are Yi Xian, right?" Yi Xian nodded. The shaman smiled. "Do you know the master of Dedeabi?" Yi Xian said, "I met him once." The shaman chuckled. "Your destiny was given to you by the master of Dedeabi, but your current destiny has already exceeded the scope of the master of Dedeabi's control. Can you tell me why?" Yi Xian looked at the shaman, then said, "You are the shaman?" The shaman nodded. Yi Xian said, "Then you should know how to calculate. Do you want to calculate?" The shaman shook his head. "Some things can be calculated, and some things can't. Moreover, you are here, isn't it better for me to ask you?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "I refuse to answer." The shaman was not angry, smiled. "You know, we can't kill you, so you are a little fearless. But I want to tell you, we really can't kill you, but this doesn't mean you can be fearless, because we can torture you. As long as you don't die, I think it shouldn't be a problem to cripple you. What do you think?" Yi Xian's face immediately darkened. He hurriedly said, "Talk, we can talk. There is no need to make it so bitter. What do you think?" The shaman smiled. "There is nothing to talk about. I ask you a question, just tell me the answer." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "I will tell you honestly, I have a few sisters who are good at fighting. One of them is super good at fighting. The other destiny you are talking about should be related to her." The shaman looked at Yi Xian. "How good is she?" Yi Xian pointed at the martial lord. "Like her, even 1,000,000,000,000 of her won't be enough." The shaman was stunned. The martial lord sneered. "You are bragging to death." Yi Xian shook his head, not saying much. In any case, no one believed him when he spoke the truth. He was already used to it. The shaman looked at Yi Xian, after a long silence, said, "That's it?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I still have a father who can fight," as he said. He pointed at the martial lord. "Someone like her should be finished with one sword strike." The martial lord's expression was calm. "Like father, like son, how strong can a father be if the son is so weak? The green-robed man, the shaman, ignored the martial lord. She looked at Yi Xian. What else? Yi Xian said, I still have a big brother. As he said, he pointed at the martial lord. My big brother is also very strong, always seeking defeat, like her, in my big brother's mouth, should be weak. The martial lord looked at Yi Xian, did not say anything, but his eyes were very cold. The shaman smiled. Anything else? Yi Xian thought, then said, I still have a sister. Her strength has not fully recovered, but I think, as he said, he pointed at the martial lord. At this time, the martial lord suddenly punched at Yi Xian's soul. It was intolerable. Seeing the martial lord suddenly attack, Yi Xian's expression changed. He quickly used instant of invincibility. Boom! The martial lord's punch landed on Yi Xian's soul, but Yi Xian was not hurt at all. At this time, the martial lord punched again. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's eyelid twitched, but at this crucial moment, the shaman stopped the martial lord. The shaman looked at the martial lord, then said, he is not lying. The martial lord was silent. She knew that the shaman had the eye of truth. If Yi Xian was lying, he could not hide it from the shaman. But could there be such a strong person in this world? Obviously, it was not possible. The martial lord glanced at Yi Xian. Continue. The shaman smiled. Anything else? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, do you know Master Dedeabi? The shaman nodded. Of course I do. Yi Xian said seriously, he is my sworn brother. Master Dedeabi? The shaman looked at Yi Xian. The eye on her staff suddenly trembled slightly. The shaman shook her head and smiled. That, you are lying. Yi Xian blinked. I am serious, I can swear. The shaman suddenly reached out and gently pinched Yi Xian's face, then smiled. How thick do you have to be able to lie with your eyes open without batting an eyelid? Yi Xian, the shaman continued, I am very clear about the relationship between you and Master Dedeabi, but obviously, you do not. But, this is not important. As she spoke, she turned to the martial lord, open the gates of hell, and send him to hell. Hearing this, the martial lord was stunned at first, then a smile appeared on his face. Yi Xian felt a trace of uneasiness. What kind of place is hell? The shaman looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Although I cannot kill you, I can still torture you. Yi Xian hurriedly said, weren't we having a good chat? Why are you suddenly playing with violence? The shaman leaned over to look at Yi Xian. Bite me? Yi Xian. Chapter 24:36. Bite? Yi Xian sized up the shaman. Where do you want to bite? Hearing this, the high priest narrowed her eyes slightly. She suddenly exerted a little more force on Yi Xian's hand. Wham! In an instant, a terrifying mental strength invaded Yi Xian's soul. Ah! In an instant, Yi Xian's eyes widened and his soul trembled violently. At this moment, he felt pain he had never felt before. This pain was indescribable and it was getting more and more intense. It was truly unbearable pain. The shaman looked at Yi Xian and smiled like a demon. Beg for mercy and I will let you go. Yi Xian suddenly lifted his head and looked at the shaman. His face was ferocious as he grinned. Is that all you've got? I beg you to do something more ruthless. The shaman bent down and looked at Yi Xian. Your fearless look is so annoying. Everyone will die, you are no exception. Let's play slowly. She then turned and walked away. Send him to hell. The martial lord looked at Yi Xian, waved his sleeves and disappeared with Yi Xian. After the two disappeared, the tomb owner appeared on the altar and walked behind the shaman. Shaman, what is the other fate of this person? The shaman looked up into the endless starry sky, a fate that has never been seen before. The tomb owner was silent for a moment. This person and the endless universe are mortal enemies. If he doesn't die, the shaman smiled, to kill him, we have to find out who is behind him. In other words, the three he mentioned. The tomb owner nodded. I will send someone to investigate. The shaman shook her head. No need. Ordinary people can't find out. The tomb owner frowned. Can't find out? The shaman nodded. You don't have to worry about this. I will take care of it. Just guard the endless tomb well. The tomb owner nodded and was about to leave when the shaman suddenly asked, where are the two women now? The tomb owner said, the emperor and Song Sheng are following them. The shaman said softly, we can't beat them? The tomb owner nodded, we have fought. We can't do anything to them. The shaman chuckled, that's interesting. The tomb owner said, should we? The shaman suddenly shook her head, no need. Just follow them and see what they want to do. The tomb owner nodded, understood. After saying that, he quietly retreated. On the altar, the high priestess slowly closed her eyes. On the staff in her hand, the eye of the true god slowly rotated. After Qin Guan and Enrich entered the boundless universe, Enrich and Enlan, the two went together. Somewhere in the starry sky, Enrich turned her head and took a glance. This glance of hers directly saw several star domains away. Suddenly, Qin Guan took out a long cylinder. She turned around and put it on her right eye, closing her left eye. After a while, she put the cylinder away and giggled. It's still following us. Enlan looked at the cylinder in Qin Guan's hand, I know this. It can't see that far. Qin Guan laughed, Missin, you have seen it in the Milky Way, right? Enrich nodded. Qin Guan smiled and said, I've improved this. You can even see the existing universe from here. Enrich was speechless. Enrich asked, where are we going? Qin Guan suddenly took out a compass. On the compass, a needle was slowly spinning. A moment later, the corners of her lips curled up. Go forward. With that, the sword beneath her feet suddenly trembled slightly, and then she disappeared into the distant end of the starry sky. Enrich looked at Qin Guan and disappeared into the distance. Not long after, the two women arrived at a mountain range. This mountain range was surrounded by mountains that stretched as far as the eye could see. Qin Guan looked at the compass in her hand. She smiled, let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she brought Enrich along and vanished not too far away. It wasn't long before the two of them arrived before a stone door. This stone door was situated halfway up a mountain, and when looked down from the stone door, it was an entire 30 kilometers deep. Enrich looked at the stone door and asked, what's this? Qin Guan smiled, a ruin. There must be a lot of treasures inside. Enrich was speechless. Qin Guan walked up to the stone door. At that moment, the stone door trembled slightly and a shadow appeared in front of her. The figure roared, who dares to trespass? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his right hand and then slammed it down. Bang! In an instant, a strand of terrifying pressure swept down from above Qin Guan and Enrich. Qin Guan took out a weapon and pulled the trigger. Bang! The figure was blasted into pieces by a ray of white light. Qin Guan walked over to the stone door and sized it up. She pushed it lightly, and it opened to reveal a passageway beneath her feet. Qin Guan chuckled, let's go. She took Enrich with her and vanished in front of the stone door. Two people were looking down from high up in the clouds. They were the Endless Territories Emperor and Song Sheng. They'd been with Qin Guan and Enrich for a very long time. They'd fought each other, but they hadn't fought. The Emperor on the left frowned, what's that place? Song Sheng sized it up and said, it should be a ruin. A ruin. The Emperor's face fell, what does that woman want? Song Sheng spoke in a low voice, a secret realm like this that we haven't discovered means that the owner of this place was definitely extraordinary. Moreover, there are usually a lot of treasures in secret realms like this. The Emperor's face darkened when he heard Song Sheng. It was obvious that Qin Guan was here to rob them. The Emperor slowly clenched his right hand when he thought up to this point. The resources in the Endless Territory were quite tight right now, and secret realms and ruins like this were extremely important to the Endless Territory. But it didn't take long for him to loosen his grip. He was about to speak when Qin Guan and Enrich walked out again. Her face was filled with a brilliant smile, and it seemed like she'd gained a lot. Qin Guan opened her palm, and the compass appeared in her hand again. A moment later, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and then she vanished into the horizon with Enrich. The emperor's face darkened as he said, "What's she trying to do? Does she take this place to be her home? She's simply a bandit." Zhangxing fell silent for a moment before he said, "We have to notify the shaman. We can't allow this woman to continue." A moment later, the two of them left. On a plain somewhere, the martial monarch was walking slowly with Yi Xian by his side. At this moment, Yi Xian had recovered his physical body. The martial monarch didn't stop him when he was recovering his physical body. The martial monarch suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. "Do you know why I didn't stop you from recovering your physical body?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "Because in your eyes, I'm not a threat at all." The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said, "You're quite smart." Yi Xian didn't say anything. He looked around and thought to himself. Hell. This place was definitely not a good place. Just like what the other party said, although she couldn't kill him now, she could torture him. Yi Xian looked at the martial monarch. It was obvious that he couldn't make a move on this woman. She was stubborn. At this moment, the martial monarch suddenly said, "We're here." With that, she stopped and looked into the distance. 1,000 feet away, there was a huge crater that spanned tens of thousands of feet. It was located in the center of the plain. In this crater, a raging fire burned. The martial monarch looked at the crater in front of her expressionlessly. "Do you know what kind of place this hell is?" Yi Xian shook his head. The martial monarch said indifferently, "Hell used to be a race, the Hell race. In the boundless universe, this race was only second to the Molo race. They were cruel and vicious. Later, they were suppressed here by the joint forces of the various races." With that, she turned to look at Yi Xian. "Good luck." With that, she was about to attack. Yi Xian suddenly said, "I'll go down myself." The martial monarch looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian walked to the entrance of hell. He bent down and looked down. He heard some terrifying roars coming from the depths of the abyss. Hell. Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and smiled. He did not think too much about it. He jumped into hell right away. The martial monarch looked down at the entrance of hell in silence. Along the way, Yi Xian directly released the human sword intent to wrap himself. However, he was shocked to find that his sword intent was being slowly corroded by a mysterious force. Yi Xian's face darkened. He looked around and saw curtains of fire. At the same time, the roars became clearer and closer. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly fell to the ground. Boom! The whole ground trembled violently and a wave of sword light flew out. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. In front of him was a huge hole. This hole was the entrance to hell and also the exit of hell. However, the edge of this exit was covered with all kinds of strange runes. Yi Xian looked around. It was dark and gloomy. It was extremely depressing and gloomy. Hell race. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. This woman wore a blood-red robe. Her hair was also blood-red. Not only that, her eyes were also blood-red. In addition, the woman was extremely beautiful. She was so beautiful that even Yi Xian was shocked. He was used to seeing beautiful women, but the woman in front of him still stunned him. Unlike other women, this woman's beauty was bewitching, but there was also a hint of strangeness about her, especially her blood-red eyes. At first glance, they were indeed terrifying, but when paired with her exquisite and perfect facial features, they became very beautiful. Another kind of beauty. The woman placed her hands behind her back. She leaned over and looked at Yi Xian. The corners of her mouth curled up into a strange smile. Welcome to hell. As she said that, her eyes flickered with a strange light. Yi Xian was shocked. Damn, this woman is not a good person. Yi Xian hurriedly activated his bloodline. In an instant, his entire body became blood red, redder than the woman. Seeing this scene, the woman was stunned. Yi Xian said seriously, "We're on the same side, we're on the same side." The woman, you're tuning into the A Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.